Death is a natural part of life. Even in the games business, moving on can be healthy. EXOK Games, the developer and publisher of the well-known indie success Celeste, announced they put their own game, Earthblade, down at the beginning of this year. They had every intention of releasing it. They proudly showcased it at the Game Awards at the end of 2022. But after delays and losing a key team member, EXOK made the difficult decision to terminate the project. In their blog post explaining why they ended development, the studio shared that Earthblade was agonizing to work on. They were struggling with the pressure of expectations atop Celeste, an indie that has sold likely 2 million or more copies by now. While they still believed it had potential, the relief of just restarting with a smaller team seemed like a wise path forward for their creativity and project enthusiasm. It wasn't easy, but they probably made the right call, and EXOK is going to live another day with its core visionaries, to restart and forge ahead. I hope they make another great game. But one of the important variables to note here is that EXOK doesn't have a corporate overlord. They wield the decision-making power. That hasn't been true for other great developers in the past though. There are many unfortunate cases, but one seems glaringly obvious. Last year, Dragon Age Veilguard was a game that received mega backlash from many fans, and some critics. Whether it's deserved or not is your call. It was well known to have had a tortured development cycle, with the kickoff happening after Dragon Age Inquisition 10 years ago. There was a reboot, and numerous key personnel would cycle on and off the project for years. But optimism lingered. See, after Mass Effect Andromeda's critical failure and reputational damage to the brand name, fans suspected that they had to hit a home run with the series' fourth entry. But many of us knew something was very off with the game last June, when we saw the reveal trailer. Cartoony visuals and a Marvel-esque tone that no longer resembled what fans loved about Dragon Age Origins 15 years later. The YouTube comments perfectly capture the sentiment of most onlookers. But when it launched last fall, that skepticism wasn't off base. The game was embroiled in culture war criticism, but more importantly, EA declared it a commercial failure soon after. Around that same time, the director of the game was no longer employed by EA. But we have to ask how in the world we got here. How did someone who is the lead designer of The Sims 3 Into the Future end up directing Dragon Age's comeback that ultimately killed the franchise? Well, this story all started about 20 years ago, during Bioware's golden age. This was a studio for nerds by nerds, steeped in D&D heritage. They created Baldur's Gate, now one of gaming's most iconic fantasy franchises. They made Star Wars: Knights of the Old Republic, arguably 2003's Game of the Year, Neverwinter Nights, Jade Empire, and more. But Bioware reached a new level of fame in the late 2000s with the introduction of a new pioneering trilogy in gaming, Mass Effect. This was a concept where the decisions you made in the first game would carry through to the end, and it was a very exciting and novel sci-fi RPG shooter hybrid. Such lofty ambitions from the studio meant big resources. That means money, lots of it, to make the kinds of games Bioware wanted to make. So they made a life-altering decision, just like the ones we would make in their games. They got in bed with private equity. And around the time Mass Effect 1 launched, EA paid cash outright to acquire the whole enchilada. The corporate machinations ramped up, and this meant creating new studios, injecting other EA assets into Bioware, meddling from EA's leadership into Bioware's internal affairs, and more. But you get it, the seeds were sown for their undoing. In 2012, the co-founders were gone. Some of gaming's best talent that made the studio fled soon after. Drew Karpyshyn, Casey Hudson, and more that shepherded their great successes. Recently, this was brought back to light by Mr. Matty Plays, one of my personal favorites on YouTube. He did an interview with one of Bioware's most notable talents from this era, Mark Darrah. Mark joined the studio on the original Baldur's Gate back in the 90s, ended up directing Dragon Age Origins, and executive produced the series as it carried on. One notable insight we got from him was that Dragon Age Origins was only supposed to be a one and done. If Bioware were left to their own devices, we'd never have the contentious sequels or even a franchise. There certainly wouldn't be a Dragon Age Veilguard that has destroyed its legacy. When all the talent is gone? When the business people who built the studio are gone? What is left? Many call Bioware a ship of Theseus. This is essentially a scholarly way of calling it a husk of its former self. A zombie studio that EA has kept bleeding money into. I don't want anyone to lose their jobs, but mismanagement, keeping something alive just to suck it dry, is arguably a worse punishment for everyone involved. Losing money on bad ideas hurts the parent company as much as the child, and the fans that actually brought these things to life commercially too. There are not many Mass Effect fans left clamoring for another game after Andromeda, but don't worry, we're getting it. The love is gone like a bad marriage, with no passion left. So maybe, or probably, it's time to pull the plug. Kill Bioware. Feed the fire, let the last cinders burn. Start anew like Maddie and her team at EXOK did. So, if you like thoughtful and considerate gaming content like this, please consider sticking around, and let me know what you think down in the comments.